Okay, so now we're going to go on to the other quadrants. And really the only difference is whether they are positive or negative. So just the signs are going to be different. Okay, so if you remember, as you look at your quadrants, right? This is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and we know that in quadrant 1, the x is positive and so is the y. But in quadrant 2, since we're going left first and then up, we have a negative and then a positive. So our x is negative and our y is positive. In the third quadrant, they're both negative, right? You go left and down, which is a double negative. Okay, and then in the fourth quadrant, you're going right first, so that's a positive, but then down, so that's a negative. So really, that's all we're remembering here. We know that this is the cosine and the sine, right? And this is the cosine and the sine. And this is the same in all of these, right? The cosine is the x and the sine is the y. So when we're looking here, whether they're positive or negative, we know that both of them in the first quadrant are positive. Okay, in the second quadrant, we know this is our x and this is our y. So our x is negative, but our y is positive. In the third quadrant, they're both negative, and then in the fourth quadrant, the y value is negative, but the cosine or the x value is positive. So those are the signs. So when you come up with the exact value, one way of doing that is to always just think about it in the first quadrant, but then just add the sign. And one way of helping you remember this, if that's not enough, is all students take calculus. Now, what does this mean? Really, all it means that all the trig functions, and you're going to learn this, what all the other ones are in the next lesson, but all trig functions are positive in the first quadrant. Okay, that's what the A stands for. The S stands for the sine and the reciprocal, which we're going to learn about, as I said, next class, are positive. Those are the only ones that are positive in the second quadrant. In the third quadrant, the tangent and its reciprocal are positive, and those are the only positives there. And in the fourth quadrant, the cosine and its reciprocal are positive in the fourth quadrant. So that's just another way of remembering it. All students take calculus, and you can think, okay, well, if I'm talking about the tangent, I know in the first quadrant and the third quadrant, the tangent's positive, but it's not positive otherwise. So that's just one way of remembering it. Okay, and some people don't even think about that at all and just draw it out, which is kind of what I do, but that doesn't mean that's the best way to do it. It just means that's the way that I prefer to do it. Okay, so here you're thinking about finding the exact value of the cosine of 150, which is the x value. So 150, you would be drawing here, right? So that's 150 degrees. Drawing your reference triangle, that means that my reference angle, because this is 180, is 30 degrees. So that gives me a 30, 60, 90. Okay, well, this is 1/2 because it's across from the 30. Across from the 60 is radical 3/2. And I know in this quadrant, it's negative. The x is negative. Okay, so when I'm looking at this particular coordinate here, I know that the coordinate is negative radical 3/2, 1/2. Since the cosine is the x value, I know that the final answer is negative radical 3/2. And again, you can always put that in your calculator to see whether it's positive or negative, even though it's going to come out as an irrational number, so the decimal is not going to end. Okay, so let's try the next one. All right, so here we have negative 150. All right, well, negative 150, the terminal side is going to be here. Okay, so that's negative 150 degrees is right here. This is negative 180. So when I draw my reference triangle, again, I have a 30-degree angle as my reference angle. So that means, again, this is a 30, 60, 90. Across from my 30-degree is 1/2, but in this quadrant, it's negative. And then this is going to be across from the 60 is negative radical 3/2. Again, it's negative here. Okay, and the sign is the y. So when I look at this coordinate, I get negative radical 3/2, negative 1/2. So then my final answer, since it's the y value, is going to be negative 1/2. And that was actually one that you could just put in your calculator because it's not irrational. It came to negative 1/2, and that will work in your calculator. Another way of looking at this is once you find your reference angle here, I know that the sine is the opposite side, so I don't even have to find the coordinate. I can just go right to the opposite side. Okay, just the biggest mistake students make are, not remembering that they have to figure out what the sine is in the other quadrants. Okay, so 315 would go all the way around and end in your fourth quadrant. So this is 315 degrees. We want to know, remember how to find a reference angle. You're looking at how many degrees does it take to get back to that x-axis. Okay, so my reference angle is going to be 45 degrees, which makes this a 45, 45, 90. All right, so that means this is radical 2/2, but it's negative. This is also radical 2/2, but it's the x value, so it's positive. And since my sine is the y value, it's going to be the negative radical 2/2. Okay, and that's it. All right, so go ahead again and do the couple of practice problems that you have.